This is the Java Quick Reference. You're going to get a copy of this when you take the actual AP exam, so you don't need to memorize this. And today I'm just going to talk about these string methods right here. There's 7 of these, starting with this one. And I know this seems a little weird. This is how you construct a new string, or actually a new object. Strings are objects, more about that later. These other ones, some of them you're familiar with. Length, substring you're familiar with. Index of, I don't think we talked about yet. Equals and compare to, I think those are new as well. So hang in there. I'm going to talk about all the string methods, and it's a little bit of a long video, but I really think it's important that you watch it till the end. The first method that they talked about on the quick reference was a string constructor. Now, I know that doesn't mean anything to you yet, but don't worry about it. The official way of creating a new string is you declare it of type string, and of course str1, that's just my variable name, and I'm saying this is a new string, and the contents of my string is hello, and that's in quotes. So I'm actually creating, when I say new something, I'm actually creating a new, in this case, string. And we're going to talk about other objects pretty soon, and the way you create new objects is you say new, whatever that is. Strings are actually objects. Don't worry too much about this yet. Strings are objects, but they're a special kind of object. So really, you can create a new string just by saying string and then a variable name equals and then something in quotes. Java knows, because strings are a special kind of object, Java knows that you're trying to create a new one of these objects. So you could create a new string by writing all of this out, or you could just put something in quotes and Java knows what you're talking about and it says, oh, the guy's trying to make a string. So let's not worry about this too much yet. All right, let's talk about length and substring. These methods you're already familiar with. So if I ask what is the length, that's really what I'm doing here. I'm saying string1.length. Hey, what is the length of string 1? Now, of course, that should tell me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The length is 5. Should be. Let's try. We'll run this in a moment. String2.substring 2 to 4. Now, I'm sure you remember how substring works. Substring returns part of a string beginning at the position that you're given here. So beginning at position 2, going up to, but not including this second number. So this should give me everything starting at position 2, up to, but not including 4. Of course, you know that when you start counting characters here, you start at 0. So 0, 1, 2 is this O right here. 3, 4 is the B. So from 2 to 4 should just give me OD. Okay? Substring with just one number gives you everything from that starting position to the end of the string. So in the second case, string2.substring 1, I should get everything starting from position 1, 0, 1. So that's this O all the way to the end. All right, let's run this, and then let's talk about the other string methods. Let's talk about the index of method. This can be very useful, and for some reason it's a little confusing to students sometimes. I don't know. So the way this works is index of looks for a string in another string. So in this example, I am looking in string 3, which is I love pizza, of course, for the index or position of, index is a position, for the index of this other string. So I am looking in I love pizza, and I'm trying to find the position of pizza. Now, index of gives you the starting position. So what is the starting position of pizza in string 3? Well, it is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Should be 7, right? Pizza starts at position 7. What if the string that I'm looking for is not in the longer string? Like, for example, I'm looking in string 3 for the index of, for the position of cookies. Well, cookies is not found in string 3. So if it's not found, you get the value -1. And that's all there is to index of. And I'll just run this real quick. So index of looks for a string in another string. So what is the index of pizza in string 3? Well, it is 7. It is position 7. What is the index of cookies in string 3? Well, it's -1. It's not found. That's all there is to index of. Now let's look at the equals method. So the equals method does exactly what you would expect. it tells you if two strings are equal to each other. In other words, do they have the same characters, right? So if I ask, is string 1 equal to string 2? Well, string 1 is hello, string 2 is also hello. Yeah, they're equal, so that should return true. Whereas if I ask, is string 1 equal to string 3, it's actually equals to string 3, it should tell me false. String 1 and string 3 are not the same. And I'll run this real quick. And no big surprise. So yes, 1 and 2 are equal. 1 and 3 are not equal. Now I know you're thinking, maybe you're thinking, can't I just use equal equal? Right? Won't that tell me if two strings are equal? Not necessarily. And I'm going to run this again. So string 1 and string 2, they do seem like they're the same. However, equals equals does something a little bit different. It does not really work as you would expect with objects. Remember, strings are objects. More about that later, but I'm going to run this just so you can see. And in fact, it says false. String 1 is not equal to string 2. So just keep this in mind. When you're comparing strings, if you want to see if they're the same, you have to use equals. Please don't use equal equal. Equal equal is how you determine whether a Boolean is the same, or whether an int is the same, or whether a double is the same. Those are primitives. Use equal equal to determine if two primitives are the same. But with objects, and more on this later, strings are objects, you really should not compare them using equals. That does something a little bit different. And again, we're going to talk about this later. The last string method that you need to be familiar with is the compare to method. Now, compare to compares two strings alphabetically and gives you a negative value, 0, or a positive value. Now, it's always a little confusing to students. Compare to, I think it helps if you think of this as like a subtraction function. And it's comparing apples, which begins obviously with the first letter of the alphabet, which maybe you could even think of as like letter 1 in the alphabet, or if you want to, I guess, computer science, you start counting at 0. So think of apples as beginning with letter 0 in the alphabet, and oranges beginning with some letter, I don't know, what is oranges in the alphabet? Maybe letter 12 or 13, I don't even know. So it's really subtracting the value of apples, which is going to have a smaller value. Things farther to the beginning of the alphabet have a smaller value. Things further down the alphabet have a bigger value. So if I take apples and I subtract oranges, I should get a negative value, shouldn't I? And if I do it the opposite, if I take oranges and I subtract, compare to is like subtraction, apples, I should get a positive value. I'm going to say this again because it's a little bit confusing. Again, things closer to the beginning of the alphabet have a smaller value than things farther down the alphabet. And then finally, if I compare apples to apples, comparing apples to apples and apples to oranges, let's see what I'm doing there, I should get 0. So let me run this and you'll see what's going on here. Yes, I get a negative value, a positive value, and 0. And this 14 just tells me the distance away in the alphabet that apples and oranges are. But typically, you wouldn't even run this like this. You would run this like a Boolean. So you would say something like, is apples compared to oranges less than 0? Or, you would make some kind of comparison like this, and you would get a Boolean value here. Actually, well, this one, let's just run this again. So typically, I'm going to say this again, typically when you use compare to, you're going to say, is it less than 0? Is it greater than 0? Is it equal to 0? And that tells you whether something comes before something else alphabetically. So apples comes before oranges alphabetically because when I subtract, when I use the compare to function, I get a negative value. It's less than 0. Yeah. I mean, you could put this the other way. I would get a greater than, like if I subtract apples minus oranges, I'll get false now. I don't want to make this too confusing for you. Compare to is a little bit confusing. Let me just say this one more time. Compare to is like a subtraction function, and it's used to determine which string comes first alphabetically. And if you just keep in mind that compare to is like subtracting, and that things closer to the beginning of the alphabet have a smaller value and things further down the alphabet have a bigger value, I think you'll get compare to straightened out in your head. But it can be a little bit tricky. So compare to gives you a negative value, a positive value, or 0. And typically, you'll compare it to 0 and get a true or false value. All right, those are all the string methods. So give them a little bit of practice, and thanks for watching. All right.